So back during Wrath of the Lich King, you might have had the fortune of finding yourself a battered hilt. I wasn't, but that's okay because they can be sold in the auction house, and I'm rich, so I just bought one. That wasn't a flex, I promise you, but what is a flex is being owner to one of the great blades in Warcraft history, Quel'Delar, which you acquire from this said battered hilt through a semi-lengthy quest chain ending with Quel'Delar choosing you as its next owner. It's a cool looking sword, all things considered, but it's not only a cool weapon, it can not only be used as a one-hander or a two-hander, but it also has a lore that is very interesting, especially if you enjoy the lore surrounding the ancient elves. Although, its lore, more specifically its origin, is very convoluted. There's not much information on Quel'Delar, probably due to the expansion the sword was released in, but after a long period of thought, I think I have a pretty solid origin story for the sword, and so today we will ask and recount the origin of Quel'Delar. And in order to do this, we need a brief history lesson. And we will recount such a history by using the in-game tome, Ancient Dragon Forged Blades, which will give us key pieces of information on learning Quel'Delar's origin. It reads, "Rare indeed are the prismatic blades forged by the combined will of the 5 dragonflights. Among the greatest of these blades were the sister swords Quel'serrar and Quel'Delar. In her wisdom, the Dragon Queen Alexstrasza gifted one of the blades to each of the elven peoples of Azeroth. Quel'serrar was to be born by a valiant Kaldorei warrior, while Quel'Delar was entrusted to a Kaldorei champion. Each blade transformed in the hands of its wielder, molding its magic to its master's strength," and then the text fades off. But from this we learn very valuable information. We learn that Quel'Delar is one of the prismatic blades of the Dragonflights and was gifted to the Quel'Dorei, the High Elves. But something you might have noticed is that the word prismatic is in quotes, as in whoever wrote this novel is taking a jab at the Dragonforged swords as if they are saying that these blades are not actually legendary in their capabilities. And why is that? What makes Quel'Delar any less prismatic according to the book's author? Well, this is where things get awkward because we don't really know. However, from this same book, we can find a clue as where to look for a possible answer. By name, the tome references another sword, a flex even larger than that of Quel'Delar, its sister, quel'serrar, the High Blade, a sword you can no longer acquire in the retail version of the game in its original form. Now, I'll be truthful with you. I had to do some digging to discover the exact questline involving quel'serrar, as it was once available in vanilla way back when. Now, you'd think that because of Classic's existence, it wouldn't be such a trouble to find it, but, well, you'd be surprised. Even with its existence, Classic WoW has a lore that remains oddly undocumented. And that actually gives me an idea, but like I said, I did manage to discover the nature of quel'serrar's acquirement, and it places things into perspective for us. According to the man that helps us reforge quel'serrar, a highborn named Lore Keeper Lydros, or Lydros, he tells us that there were many recreations of quel'serrar, but that there was only one pristine, one original creation of the High Blade with an origin that is currently unknown. He also tells us that before the fall of Neltharion, meetings between the Dragonflights were represented by the term prismatic. To directly quote the man, "Rumors exist of a single legendary blade of quel'serrar crafted for an unknown entity by the combined might of the 5 aspects. Before the abominations of Neltharion and Deathwing were thrust into our world, such meetings of the aspects were represented by the term prismatic. I could only assume that the prismatic blade of quel'serrar was a most glorious creation." He says prismatic, exactly how it is written in Ancient Dragon Forged Blades. That tells me the book was probably written by, or at least read by, Lydros at some point in the past, although he does reject to mention Quel'Delar, the very topic of this video. And a regular person might reason that this is due to the fact that Quel'Delar was not created in the lore of Warcraft until Wrath of the Lich King, so at the time of quel'serrar's quest chain, there was no sister blade in the canon. And it makes sense. Things are always being added, changed, and updated in the lore, and it's reasonable to presume that was the case. Although, if you may humor me a moment, Lydros is a highborn, one belonging to the Quel'Delar, a splinter group of night elven magi that were never exiled from Kalimdor, as was the fate of the Quel'Dorei following the Sundering. For those who need some context, way back when, following the defeat of the Burning Legion in the War of the Ancients and the Sundering that followed, the night elven people banned the use of magic from their society, as magic is what brought the Burning Legion to Azeroth in the first place. Any current users of the arcane, if they refused to put down their spells, were exiled and banished from the continent of Kalimdor. These magic users would go on to become the Quel'Dorei, and have much resentment for the Kaldorei, as the Kaldorei do for them. Because of this, it's quite possible that Lydros holds a resentment for the High Elves, as they allowed themselves to be cast out and evolve, or, well, in this case devolve, into a lesser variation of elf, instead of standing up against the Kaldorei and going their own path, much akin to the Quel'Delar. So it's possible, and I mean very possible, that because Quel'Delar was forged and entrusted to the High Elves, Lydros might have considered the blade to be lesser, and so is the reason as to why he neglected to mention it to us all of those years ago. And I think that brings us full circle, and opens a good line of questioning that might lead us to the answer of today's video. Why would the Dragonflights make twin blades for two races that hate one another? And while we don't have that answer, I do have a theory. Since the Quel'Dorei stem from the Kaldorei, it's quite possible that the Dragonflights, who have ties to the ancient elves of yore, sought to bring the two peoples together by forging weapons of similar design and shape as a show of good faith. Perhaps the aspects believed that by sharing weapons stemming from the same heritage, it would reopen talks between the elves after centuries apart. And so, in their latest recreations of the fabled original Highblade, the dragons created two sister swords to represent two sister races. And while that origin does hold some logic and does make sense, it is not the only one. If we use the detail that quel'serrar and Quel'Delar are just recreations of another blade, it's quite possible that this true blade Lydros speaks of was forged long before the Sundering and gifted to the Dorei of long ago. But since quel'serrar is a direct reforging of the original blade, and since Quel'Delar wasn't forged until much later, it's quite possible a sword was requested by the Quel'Dorei people in some sort of attempt to match or outdo those who banished them from their home, which then makes Quel'Delar as the off-brand great value version of the current Highblade, forged out of spite, hatred, and disdain for the Kaldorei. Really, your guess on which one could be correct is up to your own interpretation. I like them both, so either will do me just fine. If you have any questions or comments about this video, Warcraft, or its lore, you can leave them in the comment section down below, and I'll be sure to read each and every one of them. Thanks for watching.